I know a lot of people are wanting to get into the mental health space, but they don't know where to put like their footing in. And you talk a lot about values. Where do you see places and spaces for occupational therapists to either embed it into their practice or to create their own version of the brave OT you?
I think we can't talk about OT and mental health without also addressing that there are some differences based on like how we're funded here in Canada versus in the US or UK or
Mm,
Australia, for instance, right? We're always doing mental health, whether we're working with a kid on sensory processing or some emotional regulation. This is their mental
mhm,
health, right? If
mhm,
you're working with a person who's going home after a hip replacement, there are mental health aspects there that you're
mhm,
addressing, right? You're never just looking from a phys med perspective. You're never just looking from the problem of what the referral said, right? You're
mhm,
always
mhm.
looking at the whole person
Yeah.
and almost always, if we're thinking about people in the hospital or people who are working through some challenges, their disabilities, at the point we get them, they're often in one of the hardest spots in their life. And with that often comes grief and stress and anxiety and fear and so many things that OTs are addressing it, like
Right.
that nurses are addressing it, that other healthcare professionals are can't help but address it. You're listening to the Brave OT podcast with me, Carlin Nink. This podcast is all about empowering occupational therapists to step up, level up, blaze some trails, and maybe engage in a little conscious rebellion in service of our profession, our clients, our work, our businesses, and living our mission wholeheartedly. We are all about keeping it real, doing hard things, unhustling, being curious, exploring, growing through our challenges, and finding joy, fulfillment, and vitality as we do so. Really, we're OTing ourselves and each other. I hope you love this episode. My guest today is Ashley Ballou, somebody that I really admire for her deep commitment to enhancing the well-being of clients, caregivers, and therapists. In this conversation, we take a deep dive into the holistic approach of occupational therapy, discussing the vital role it plays not only in daily activities, but also in mental health and spiritual well-being. We explore the importance of servant leadership, the intersection of personal values and professional practice, and the different challenges OTs face in Canada and the US, particularly in the area of mental health. Ashley opens up about her personal journey, sharing compelling experiences from caring for her grandmother to juggling professional life while being the mother of 5. We also touch upon the essential need for occupational therapists to embody bravery, authenticity, and encourage them to trust their clinical intuitions and align their actions with their true purposes. This conversation is packed with heartfelt insights, practical advice, and unwavering encouragement to pursue your calling with courage. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to introduce our sponsor, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR with a human touch. Whether you're switching your software or going paperless for the first time, the Jane team knows that the onboarding process can feel a little overwhelming. That's why with Jane, you don't just get software, you get a whole team. Jane's award-winning customer support is available with every subscription. You can contact them by phone, email, and chat whenever you need it, even Saturdays. You can also book a free account, set up consultation to review your account, and ensure you feel confident about going live. If you'd like some extra advice along the way, you can tap into their lovely community of practitioners, clinic owners, and front desk staff through Jane's community Facebook group. If you're interested in making the switch to Jane, head to jane.app/switch to book a one-on-one demo with a member of their support team. And don't forget to mention my code VITALITY at the time of sign up for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Hey, Ashley, I am really, really excited that we are having this conversation. We've been talking about it for a while, haven't we?
I know it's been a long time coming. I'm so elated to be invited. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. My pleasure. May I ask you to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ashley Ballou. I'm an occupational therapist of a little bit over 10 plus years. I own a mobile private practice called My Potential Therapy and Wellness. And it is mostly in Houston, Texas. but we do see individuals virtually. I also have I call them auxiliary things that I do. I have many.
Spin-offs,
But
exciting side quests.
exactly. I'm a woman of many side quests. So I am a lead servant for a group called Black Allied Health Therapists. I also have a group that I cater to the TLC, or the therapy, leisure, and needs of the OT therapist, called TLC for OTs. I also have a therapist Bible study group where we meet to just discuss the world in which we live in and how we can support each other to be better spiritually fed for the quest of being a therapy servant. And I also have a group to cater that is like a spinoff to my business called Caregiver Thrive. So Caregiver Thrive focuses on the quality of life needs of just the caregiver, and just really want to pour into that caregiver, making sure that their wellness needs as well as their personal leisure need from it.
Oh, I love that. I love that you're multi-passionate and that you are giving yourself room to do all of these things. I really love the way that you being an OT shines through in the way you're seeing this. So I think
Mhm.
OTs, we're really good at stepping back and seeing the whole picture. And we're never just like, well, this is the client or patient and this is me. And that's all that matters. Like we look at the context, we look at the people in their lives, we look at the therapist and what they're coming with and their beliefs and resources and how they're empowered and the environment. Like you have chosen services that hit on so many of those areas because they're all important.
Yeah, they're all important just for various reasons. A lot of times we start, dibbling and dabbling in things, starting our career routes in things that we've experienced personally, kind of working backward. I'm I've been a caregiver for my late grandmother. This is actually her birthday, her heavenly birthday today.
Happy
And
birthday there.
I know I love my granny. She's amazing. But
Oh,
I was her long distance caregiver for 8+ years. And I just remember like my mother and I, this is like, that's how big our family, like that's big. And how we really needed support. And it took us a long time to find balance and to find not only occupational balance, but just balance in understanding the healthcare system. And so it, it spoke to my heartstrings to be able to pay it forward.
yeah.
So I really am thankful for the opportunity to serve caregivers. But then I'm also thinking about like the therapist. A lot of us therapists, a lot of us OTs are not taking full care of ourselves because
Well,
we're constantly serving and giving and pouring out. And I feel that one of my, I call it superpowers,
yeah.
is to pour in to others and not neglect myself, but to pour into others while I'm pouring into myself, and really help therapists get from a place of distress to a place of thriving and higher potential. So I love that. And then with my practice, I've been a dual therapist, kind of like generalist, I would say. I've seen school age kids and I've seen geriatrics for my entire career. And I absolutely love doing both at the same time. I don't know why my mind is wired that way. I'm just thinking it's a gift of some sort. But
You love
I
people and you need love
I
people who
do.
are more vulnerable, right?
Yeah, the most vulnerable population, right? To take care of our children and to take care of our elderly. I find it as a blessing to serve them and see that their needs are met, and even why I even chose occupational therapy, it's
Yeah.
a servant like place to be.
And interestingly, I serve the people in the middle. So I don't work in pediatrics or geriatrics. I'm in an adult population.
Yeah.
I'm really comfortable there. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. I love that you serve the middle because the middle needs love too. But you can speak to that because you've experienced probably middle like thing, right?
Yeah.
And you have older children, and those needs change as your life seasons change. So it's a
True.
blessing to have someone in that space as well.
And I think for me, it's that my focus has been on mental health, and certainly children and seniors have mental health challenges as well. And there's something about that middle. I mean, the middle people are often caring for both, right? So there's that
Mhm.
often that sandwich generation, and mental health challenges also really impacting their productivity. And then there's sort of being a cycle from there, that if the person who earns the money and takes care of all the people and does all the things is not well and can't work, um,
Mhm.
then the others aren't well taken care of either. Yeah, I'm good in that middle. And I think it probably even goes back to a lot of my family upbringing and things like that too, where the needs were. But I always thought I would actually work in peds. That was actually my intention
Really?
when I went to OT school, and ended up
Wow. Yeah, and it's okay. Like I don't work with like all kids. I work with school age kids. I have a something about being able to advocate for a child in school and making sure that their needs are met. You know, all the educational systems are different. I rarely work within just the home. And if I do work in a home, I ask the family like, hey, how can I support them at the school level too, because that's their form of work, right? And sometimes, like you're saying, the responsibilities of that middle, they're pulled in different areas. Well, a student or a child is pulled in so many different areas in school, and it can impact the way that they see their home life, or they react or respond to their families, or respond or react in the community. And so it's
Yeah.
just very vital for me to see that area is taken care of. And maybe it's a glitch because I have 5 kids, right? So I would want someone to do that for my children. So if they see like a red flag, and so maybe I'm just a second for, making sure people are taken care of well. And I think I mentioned to you before we started, this was my grandmother's birthday, and she was like my best friend when she was alive. And I know even before I started becoming like her caregiver, I knew that I would always go make sure like her needs were met and made sure that she had everything she could possibly have to make her quality of life better. And I always told myself if I was to get in healthcare, she would be the inspiration. I would want to meet a whole bunch of people and treat them like they were my grandparents. That's probably another thing that pulled at our heartstrings. It's just wanting to see those needs met. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really good. You use the term servant. Can you
Oh,
define
okay.
how you see that term servant and how that fits for you?
Well, I'm looking at it almost like in a context of servant leadership. Occupational therapists are managers. We are all managers of whether you can say it in the technical sense, caseload or workload, but we are all managers of people. It's our job to take care of them. But it's also our job to also use that therapeutic use of self. And it's when I think of therapeutic use of self, I think of humbling, being a humble servant. So I am bringing myself down from my credentials and bringing myself down from my degrees, and I'm bringing myself down to where they are, and even lower, and saying, how can I be a blessing and serve you as the person that is in this, condition or crisis. When I think about my therapy group for Black Ally Health Therapists, there are a variety of needs amongst the therapists. They're not only OTs, they're PTs and speech therapists, and they have dynamic needs related to their jobs, their roles, And even just like on the national level, just thinking about what our environment looks like on the outside world and a lot of pressures. And I feel that anyone that's in leadership or moderating or me, myself as the leader, it's not my job to say, hey, I know it all. I founded this group, etc. It's my job to say, how can I best serve you to create solutions, to connect you with people, to help walk alongside you to manage whatever problem or issue or concern you are having. How can I, as a former student, because we also have students on our platform, how can I, as a former student, serve you, make sure that your needs are met, that you're not just walking this life alone? I think that's a big theme of my life is that no one walks alone. And this is adopted from a church I used to attend. I'll no longer attend only because of geographical differences. But I remember that pastor would, you know, it wasn't like a huge church, but it was like huge enough to be like need some parking attendants. So I remember he would park people. He would meet you out in the sun. I remember when he would have days where we would have to go do landscaping at the church. And he would be also landscaping. He would be the parking attendant. And he would still have to teach the sermon, but he was an example of what the servant leadership looks like and
Yeah.
looked like. And I was so impressed because at that time I had yet not seen anyone do such and was consistent with it, very consistent with no matter how big the church grew. And I was just so impressed. Like it was just our level of humbleness. And I just feel that sometimes when we get our letters and our credentials and our certifications, I never ever want to get so informed or so credentialed, if you will,
Yeah.
that I never forget where I came from and what I seen in the younger years of my time as a clinician.
So really staying, yeah, you're not better than anyone. You're there in there with the people who need your support, who you're working with, collaborating with
Right.
your equals, your collaborators. You bring a unique skill set to it, but if you are positioning yourself above anybody, you can't fully meet them.
Exactly. And it may make it hard for a patient or a client to relate to you. It's only sometimes when you share your story or you show a level of humbleness that people tend to really open up. I
Yeah.
feel like with this podcast, the OT, I've listened to a few episodes and I feel like when I hear your guests open up, it makes me to believe like, oh, they're my equal, like you just said. They're not too high to be reached out to via email or something.
Totally, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we do share that value. I haven't used the term servant, but I do talk about those I serve. And so yeah, I like to work that language in because I think that's really important. And I also think like a lot of my friends are psychologists and they have a lot more regulation around boundaries than we do.
Mm.
And I really appreciate that, in a lot of ways, they are required to maintain boundaries and have limitations on how much of that therapeutic use of self or how much they can share. And
Mhm.
while we also need to respect boundaries and that we're not dumping our stuff on people, I appreciate that it's not so regulated that we can really customize. And there is so much gray, especially when we're doing different types of things.
Mhm.
Like I've got my mental health OT practice, but
Mhm.
I've also got, where I'm coaching other OTs. And it is gray. Like as much as I'd love to call it all OT, there's regulations that don't allow me to do so. So I have to be careful about separating and clarifying. And so I can appreciate that. Like I do tend to share a lot more of myself in my coaching
Mhm.
business because that is more natural and people are they
Mhm.
are my peers and they're other professional peers and it makes a lot of sense. And so then to sort of put a lot of my stuff on someone who's really struggling with their mental health wouldn't be appropriate. So we have to be careful in
Oh, yeah. Definitely use wisdom and discretion, right? With how you share your story. They're not, that's another, I think, thing is not to be self-serving when you are in a leadership role or in a manager role, as we all OTs are, to not be self-serving when you're, and then also when you're saying servant, lead servant or servant leader, to look at it as, okay, I'm sharing me, but I'm also sharing this only to help you to get to a space in this therapeutic process that you are comfortable, that you're safe in where we're going. It's almost used to navigate the therapeutic process. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree about the discussion that it's used when sharing your story. Definitely not just blurting everything out because it's not about you. That's what
That's
you got
exactly
to keep in context.
that's the filter. Is this about me or is this about them? And I'll catch myself too. Like I'll pause and go, I'll even say, hey, like I'm inclined to share a story with you.
Mhm.
And then pause. And the question I'm asking myself is this for me or is it for you? And so I'll often even clearly say, I'm sharing this story because I think it might be helpful or might be validating or might give hope or I don't know, right? But I actually kind of make myself pause, consider, and then even reveal my intention ahead of time. So they're not kind of going, man, I thought
What
this
was the
session was
point of
about
that?
me. Like, when did this come about you?
Exactly. Exactly. And even letting them know in advance, like that helps, just facilitate community and cohesiveness that we understand that this is a safe place, but I might ask you questions to kind of steer you into the right direction. So that is exactly like, I love it. I love how you're vibing here.
You're vibing. No surprise. And I think that's kind of it comes back to values, right? Like that I know that everybody has individual values and everybody's values are important for them, but we do tend to gravitate more to people with whom we have more values overlap. And so before we started recording, we're having a little love in about this. How we really appreciate that overlap in each other and the way we show up in the online community, the way we show up in the OT community.
Oh, and we want to celebrate those type of values. Not that also, obviously, it helps so much to like share values, but we want to celebrate everyone's, victories. We want to celebrate, we want to address their needs and things of that nature. And I, I found that with being a group leader, it's an interesting balance to find like out the needs because you have to build like so much trust. But once you kind of set the boundaries of like, okay, these are my values, these are the values of the group. And if that resonates with you, stay. If not, there's other places to go.
For sure. You don't have to be everything for everybody. And people don't have to be perfectly aligned with your values either. And I want you to find the kind of support you need too.
Yeah. So I'm curious to ask you in this season of life, not, I guess, per se, not like middle age or younger, older, but in this season of life and where you see occupational therapy, I know a lot of people are wanting to get into the mental health space, but they don't know where to put like their footing in. And you talk a lot about values. Where do you see places and spaces for occupational therapists to either embed it into their practice or to create their own version of the brave OT you?
I think we can't talk about OT and mental health without also addressing that there are some differences based on like how we're funded here in Canada versus in the US or UK or
Mhm.
Australia, for instance, right? I think you guys have more obstacles to fully going into mental health in the US, or there needs to be more workarounds or understanding how to bill for things. And we tend not to we don't need to think about that so much here in Canada. And so I want to acknowledge my privilege, I suppose, in that way. And at the same time, acknowledge that we're always doing mental health, whether we're working with a kid on like if you're doing some sensory processing or some emotional regulation, this is their mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're working with a person who's going home after a hip replacement, there are mental health aspects there that you're
Mm-hmm.
addressing, right? You're never just looking from a phys med perspective. You're never just looking from the problem of what the referral said, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
always
Mm-hmm.
looking at the whole person.
Yeah.
And almost always, if we're thinking about people in the hospital or people who are working through some challenges, their disabilities, at the point we get them, they're often in one of the hardest spots in their life. And with that often comes grief and stress and anxiety and fear and so many things that OTs are addressing it, like
Right.
that nurses are addressing it, that other healthcare professionals are can't help but address it, right? Like I think of some of the most beautiful moments I've had with doctors in my life have been when
Mm-hmm.
they truly saw me and for what I was feeling and experiencing and the
Oh,
whole
yeah.
me in this difficult moment.
Oh, yeah. Anyone that like takes a little bit more time to hear you out and hear what your needs are is always like the primary care individual. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
that's their number one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I asked you that because that's something that I even see is a struggle for me to make suggestions on. You are right. There are so many barriers that we face as occupational therapists here in the state when it comes to, at least in the state where I live, which is Texas, we're not considered as mental health professionals.
Right.
And that is very disheartening when I meet a social worker or a psychologist or just a licensed counselor and they say, "Oh, well, I did not know that occupational therapists did that."
Yeah. It's heartbreaking because it's truly where we started, right, as a profession,
Right.
and it's
Exactly.
it just adds into that sense of, "Well, can I then? If the rest of the healthcare team doesn't think I can do this, can I?" There's so many layers of, well, it's my scope of practice, I know that, but then I get into a job where I'm not seen in that way, and they're not seeing me in that way because the insurance company won't
Mhm.
pay for me to do that, and then I could go on a whole thing about how backward it is that insurance is determining your scope of
Yeah.
practice, right?
Yeah, but you made a point to say that you can embed that into your evaluation. You can embed that into your treatment sessions. There's ways to embed it even on just a conversational level, even though it may not be billable. Having that knowledge allows us to be brave clinicians and brave OTs to be able to tap into that mental health component because you never know what questions are not being asked to families and you might be the only one and you are shown as caring. And we always talk about like advocacy of the profession and you by asking those unique questions really opens the door for occupational therapists, therapy to shine through. I literally just had a conversation with a caregiver of a patient of mine, and she's going to be discharged through from a lower level of care to a moderate level of care. And I was just checking in on her and just making sure that her discharge date was the same. And I didn't start off with the conversation like, oh, Miss So and so should be discharged Thursday, Friday. Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much. Take care. Click. Okay. And oh, I'm by the way, I'm the occupational therapist that will be receiving her. But I stayed on the phone like an extended amount of time. And she eventually shared with me, she was like, my our sister doesn't really want to receive occupational therapy. And I just sat there and listened just to see if she was going to ever share the why. And she did. She was saying that she didn't have a favorable experience with a prior therapist and she didn't understand our scope. So she didn't see the value. And I feel like that was mental health to some regard, you know,
And just
embedding that.
thinking about how we motivate people and how we understand the motivation, how we understand how they're accepting what we're offering, like all of those aspects of, mental health. We're looking at people's emotions and behaviors and
Mhm.
thoughts and how all of these things are working together so that they can
Mhm.
engage in the occupations that are meaningful. And so you're asking those questions. Like I don't think you can do a proper assessment without asking, even if it's starting with, well, what are you not engaging in your day-to-day life? Are you doing these things? And no, I don't even know where to start with that. Oh, okay. Well, what's that all about? And I can't imagine not, or to go, oh, well, if that's
Yeah.
motivation, I can't deal with that, right? Like, let's go on to
Exactly.
just solving
Yeah.
problems with real people. I think it tends to be well received if people feel that you hear what their challenge is and you go, oh, okay, I want to understand why that's challenging. And I want to understand why that's challenging so that I can then help you. What do we need to do? Do we need to adapt? Do we need support? Do we need to figure out why that's frustrating? Do we need to choose something similar it's more accessible for you? Like, what
Right.
is it? Right?
Right.
And
And I
people want
simply at the end, yeah, people do want that. But if we don't take out the time to listen, we
totally.
won't even get there. And yes, I know, I guess in the States, like time is of the essence, but maybe that's where we should start is just the listening part.
If you don't get
Listening.
to those layers, you often won't find out why it's not working or why that person's not safe or why they didn't follow through with their home treatment. And those things lead to readmissions and costing more money and them not getting back to a level of function that they might have otherwise. And you have
Right.
to listen to uncover those things, right?
Exactly. As she mentioned prior, while I was being trying to be a good listener,
Yeah, yeah.
she mentioned prior that she was like, "Oh, I have to go to the assisted living to pay the bill because she's still not there, but we have to still pay the bill." And I was like, "Okay, I'm listening." And I was like, "We understand that different levels of care cost different amounts of money." I said, "Well, occupational therapy is here to make sure that you stay at the lowest level of required care as possible. So that way you're not expending more money." And I shared with her my job to be a caregiver training and carryover. And I said at the end, I was like, just give OT a chance. We won't let you down.
Yeah, yeah. We try really hard not to, at least. Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
It's hard to be
But
in a profession, though, where it's sort of that common thing we hear among our peers that it's hard to be having to essentially justify our existence to our clients and our peers
right.
in order to provide the service. I think it's gotten better. Like, I've been at this for 20 years now, and definitely I do way less needing to explain my value than I
Mhm.
did 15 years ago, for sure. Do
Oh,
you find
yeah.
in the 10 years you've been at it that
Yes, I have found that I have to explain less, and it could be potentially, I mean, just as a loose thought, because everything went virtual
Yeah.
during the pandemic, that people act like caregivers and loved ones had to actually sit and maybe watch what they were actually experiencing, like their loved ones were actually experiencing in therapy. And they were able to actually sit in our session. And so, for what it's worth, word spread about what type of therapy they were receiving, and voila.
voila. Voila.
Voila, we are known. And then I also feel like we are also serving our community better, not only through like in person where we are doing screenings and things, but even virtually with all the groups that are ever growing.
Mhm.
We have these groups that invite parents and invite loved ones, and we have specific groups where therapists are now trained to pour in into these groups. And that's encouraged, right? We are supposed to be serving. If we're not self serving, we are serving in community groups. We're giving answers to and solutions to problems. And we are being recognized through, oh, this person is out here sharing a lot of information. I wonder what they know about it. Oh, they're occupational therapists, and we are getting recognized for the types of information we're delivering to the community.
I like that. And I think that they're like, I'm thinking about, I think maybe it was a Facebook post or something
Mhm,
that I commented on, and I think this conversation happens in different ways, but I tend to take the approach too that I'll show you the value of occupational therapy rather than try to sell it up front. That
mm,
sort of let me explain all the full scope of OT and confuse the heck
mhm.
out of you with models and all of the things. Then you go, okay, I don't even know. Like, no thanks. I don't know. Right.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
instead, I'm thinking about phoning and calling a new client who's been referred to me for my mental health services. I often will say, hey, I am an occupational therapist. I received a referral from so and so. Were you expecting a call from me? And they'll say, yeah, so and so said you could help me with this and this. Or, yeah, I've been wondering what the heck an occupational therapist is.
Yes,
and
indeed. I've had
and so
many of those calls.
totally, totally. And so rather than jump into all of the like proper definition, I'll often say, often I've read the referral already, but even if I don't have a lot of information, I'll tend to say something along the lines of, right, well, I know you're seeing a psychologist, or you've done this before. And so occupational therapy is a little different because we focus on the things that you want to and need to be doing and what's making it challenging to do some of those things that you're not doing right now. Figure out what the gap is between here and where you'd like to be, and
Mhm.
then work on a plan together. Figure out how to help you do that. And they all go, oh, I need that. I'm
Wow.
like, awesome,
I didn't
awesome.
know what I didn't know I need. Right. I love
Totally,
I
totally.
love those aha moments.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
I'll give you a try. Yeah.
totally, totally. And in this case too, they're often mandated to see me by a third party payer, which is interesting too. They're like, all right, they told me. But usually they do a good sell job, or they'll say, yeah, no, I'm already have a psychologist for that. And I say, yeah, I'll actually work with your psychologist. So you're seeing the psychologist in the clinic, and you guys are talking about your thoughts and your feelings and your history and your what you're trying to do. And there's so
Mhm,
many layers of that. And then when I focus on sort of, well, what are you doing day to day? And what are you wanting to do day to day? And
mhm,
how can we apply what you're learning from the psychologist? Maybe I've got some other tools, but how do you take
mhm,
that into your day to day activity and
mhm.
really live it is my job. And they're like, well, I need that. Okay.
Yeah, a client actually told me that. She said because her child was seeing a psychologist, and she was like, "Oh, you're the doing part."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm the
know.
doing part. I get whatever they're learning,
Yep.
I will collaborate with them, and I am the doing part where we generalize
Yeah.
the skills
Totally. Totally.
in all different settings, whatever setting is meaningful to you guys, and whatever setting you would foresee, because this was a child, foresee would like to see that child thrive in. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm,
Um, I found it also goes the other way too. When I'm working with a psychologist, not always,
mhm,
but I'm not always
mhm,
working with psychologists. Often I'm the only person
mhm,
seeing them, and I'm teaching them a lot of those tools to manage the thoughts and the feelings and the internal experiences that are getting in the way of the doing. And I use a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy in that, and I love that.
mhm,
But what's really interesting when I am working with a psychologist, if I'm seeing
mhm.
the client out in the community, I'm seeing a different version of the client than the psychologist sees when they come into the office. So they're seeing
Right.
a person who got dressed, got in the car, drove to the office. They are sitting in somebody else's space, being a different version than the natural person I maybe saw in their home that's turned upside
Mhm,
down. And when I can see why it's difficult to maybe clean the kitchen because it's actually months of dirty kitchen and not
mm,
just that they didn't clean up after supper, right? And being able to share that information back. Or if I've met the client at a coffee shop and they had like a really heightened emotional response to struggling to find parking, or
mhm,
got to the time to order and they got so overwhelmed and they couldn't look the cashier in the eye, or
Mhm.
problem solving broke down, or they couldn't find the words, or the opposite happened. They did great. Like suddenly it was on and we didn't think they were functioning as well as I
Mm.
observed them functioning. To be able to share that information back too is it's really
Right.
helpful to have those kind of the psychologists I work with often will say, wow, you're like my eyes and ears out there in the world. Could you try this next? Like I've been trying to teach this to them and they're not applying it. Could you, it sounds like you could maybe apply it here or there. Perfect. Let's do
Nice.
it.
Yeah, that's truly the collaboration that we as therapists want to see, or at least I hope everyone that's listening would like to engage in, because this is truly looking at the whole person. This is truly making sure that their quality of life is top notch. And you should want every team player to be on one accord. Yeah. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. And I think the same thing is going to be for my student who she is in band, and has a lot of different requirements, especially if you're higher ranked or higher up. And those demands do not get easier as you go up. And so it's my job to even reach out to the schools and make sure that their needs are met. And yeah, it's a little nerve wracking because you have to meet with people that are not necessarily in the same professional field. Like, let's say, OTs usually work with PTs or speech therapists or case managers or nurses. Well, you may have to meet with the teacher or the band teacher. And sometimes that can be a little nerve wracking for us who might be introverted. But when you are taking on the value of being a servant and not being, you have to sometimes step out of your comfort zones to do the things that you must do to make sure that the client is well taken care of. So, yeah.
Do you identify as an introvert?
Yeah, a little bit. I would say because I was raised as the only child for 10 years. So I was kind of like an inborn like introvert. I do like spending time alone. I'm an extrovert to the regard of making sure that everyone is okay and well taken care of. And of course, like as a therapist, I'm always wanting to make sure people feel comfortable and safe. So I would say that I'm definitely outspoken in that regard, but I like to do a lot of alone things. So would that make me an introvert per se?
I think that I don't know, like, I think that it's doesn't do us a service to have a
Hmm.
binary definition. Um,
Mm.
I think the definition tends to be where do you derive energy? And
Mm.
so if we're an introvert and we can do extroverted things, but need to recharge our social battery, or that we kind of recharge with
Mhm.
alone time rather than recharge with more social engagement, I think that's the definition, but I can think of examples on both sides. I'm feeling like I'm more introverted as I get older. And also, though, I'm thinking there's this shift in people pleasing behavior, to be honest, is a lot behind it.
Mm.
That perhaps a lot of my extroversion at a younger time was about fitting in and connecting and
Mhm.
community. And I like connecting and community. I'm
Right.
less about fitting in at this point. And if I'm not for you, I'm not for you. That's fine. I don't actually have to sell you on me being
Yeah.
everything that you could
Yeah.
possibly to be.
I
Right.
think I care to regard to not fitting in. I don't, let me say, I don't care. I do care to some regard only because I feel like if the way want to serve people is not being reached because of my inability to be understood,
Mm.
then that poses a barrier on my purpose,
Yeah.
on me carrying out my purpose driven life. However, do I care? Do I care about what people are saying about me, how my approach is, or maybe how different it is? No, because the bottom line is everyone is given a God given ability and talent. And if you are true to that, then the only person that you really should worry about is, in my opinion, like how God judges you, how God would say you have carried out your mission in life. And so everyone wasn't given your mission. You have your own unique role here to play. And if you're carrying out your role and staying focused, then everyone else's
I love that.
thoughts and feelings about you are not relevant.
And I love hearing your spiritual values come out in that in clinical settings. How do you bring that to the table? Like thinking that maybe not everybody would feel the same, right?
Of course,
And
yeah.
how do you read that and how do you engage bringing that spiritual side of you or spiritual side of them into therapy?
That's a great question. I am very big on letting people know that during our evaluation, it's okay not to be okay as long as you're on your way to being okay, as long as you're making that one step forward. And I always remind them how throughout our sessions, let's just say, how they have grown. And growth is ongoing. It's never like evaluation discharge kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
forever growing. So let's just say we discharge. That doesn't mean that you're not done growing. And I am a big advocate of even when they're feeling like down or down on themselves or in lots of pain, or let's just say, oh, I can't do therapy today because I had an unexpectedly, I feel so bad. I feel so guilty. I just say, hey, it's okay. Things, give yourself grace. This is the season in which you're in. I'm here to meet you where you are. And so I use words in terms like grace, grow, and just really sitting and listening and telling them or recalling them of where they came from. Look how much growth you've had. Look how 3 weeks ago you were bruised and couldn't lift your arm, and look at you now. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so
Okay.
proud of you. I do a lot of I'm so proud of you because people don't hear that. People don't get celebrated as adult. I mean, kids might, but adults don't get celebrated with the good jobs and oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. And I don't sound like flat. Like I really make it a big deal. I'll tell someone that they confide in or on a family, like, oh my gosh, I'm super proud of Miss So and so because Miss So and walked from here to there and oh my gosh, she is just a rock star. And I think those terms don't have to, let's just say, if you don't believe like in spiritual things, those acts of love, those words, and those moments of appreciation is spiritual. It speaks to our mindset that, yes, I can give myself grace. Yes, I can show myself love. Yes, gone, I have been through a lot, but I am going I'm going. I'm still striving. I'm still in a work in progress. And that speaks to our spirit being.
Yeah,
And those are ways that I incorporate my spirituality with my clients.
I love that. Do you have, I know a lot of work you're doing is around helping other professionals fill their buckets as they're filling others and taking care of others. There's a spiritual question in here somewhere. I don't know. I want to hear more about that in general, but also how are you encouraging other therapists to engage in their spiritual selves, other professionals?
I do it several ways. I have been just starting with, sometimes you have to start with something that is like concrete and understandable. So I really start with the 8 aspects of wellness.
Okay.
And within that, you carry in that spiritual component and tapping into what they feel and they know about their spiritual self or their spirit being or their mental being. I encourage them to incorporate practices, whatever that might look like for them, the practices that would in turn strengthen their spiritual wellness.
Yeah.
And so it may look different for everyone. It's really hard to kind of give answer to like specific strategies and ways. But
But
it's
you're meeting
really,
them where they are, I'm hearing, and encouraging some practice, right? So
yes, yes, yes.
perhaps for
Mhm,
somebody, it might be focusing on breathing. For somebody, it might be
mhm,
focusing on getting out into nature. Another person, it might be prayer. It might be
mhm.
reading scripture.
Meditation.
Like,
Mhm,
yeah, there's so
mhm.
many things. It doesn't have to be religious, right? But helping that person identify ways they're connecting to their source, to what's important, to ground.
Right, right. Because it's important to be still enough to take in what's disconnecting you from the mind, body, and spirit connection. What is that? And if you're unable to get to a space to do that, then let's help you to start with just sitting for like 30 seconds. Awkward silence, it's also okay when I'm with a client that you don't have to fill the void with work. Just because there's an awkward silence, it's okay.
Yeah,
So,
truly holding space for people.
most definitely. Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I am
Mhm.
curious how I meet a lot of really multi-passionate OTs, right? I think we just can't help but be multi-passionate. We want to do all the things. We've got ideas and just there's like bing, bing, bing. I want to do all these things. I could
Yeah.
see all of these opportunities to make a
Yeah.
difference. And you're
Yeah.
doing many. How are you attending to setting limitations on how much you're giving away and making sure that you're maintaining your well-being? How do you navigate that with many different projects on the go?
I really appreciate you asking that question. So I had to start this back in 2020 before the pandemic.
Yeah.
I had my set of twins. I have, like I mentioned earlier, I have 5 children and thankfully one husband.
Yeah.
But I started that journey probably back in 2019 when I was just overwhelmed. And I was overwhelmed because I had so many kids. I was like the little woman who lived in a shoe. I was the little young woman who lived in their shoe. And
So many children, she didn't know what to do.
exactly. So I said something had to give. And going to maladaptive or, behaviors is not the answer.
Weird. So wine, shopping, avoidance, what are we eating? You don't have to tell
Exactly, exactly. I'm not going to say, but for what it's worth, I asked my husband. I know everyone that has a different relationship with their spouse, but I asked my husband permission to leave my full-time job. And I took a leave. And at that time, my job was bringing in 75% of the income.
Wow.
Yes. And so I took a leave and I was like, I need to leave because it is weighing heavy on my mental. And he gave me permission to leave. And so I left. I put a resignation in a month before the pandemic became
Oh my
COVID.
goodness. No way.
And I was like, I have to create a boundary of protecting my mental health before mental health became mental health. And I think I had two things. I think I don't want to call it like a panic attack or anything, but I just got to a space that I just got tired. And I was just like, I cannot be in a space and care for twin infants. At that time, she was like 1 year old. And then I have two other kids. I was like, there's no way I can be an effective mother and be a present mother. So I had to make that decision early because of just the circumstance. Now, fast forward, obviously they're older and they're all in school, thankfully. No daycare for us, thankfully. And I still am here in this space of a boundary. And why? Because I value being a present mother. My mom, she was a teacher. She's retired now, but she was a teacher. And of course, with summers off, like my mother was just like a present mother. And I know how valuable that was to me as a youth. And with that, I was like, there's just no way I can be a present and know my children.
Yeah.
And I was willing. and sometimes still willing to sacrifice the comfort of finances and luxuries for the sake of being present for my children and being present for myself. Being able, I think I mentioned earlier about being willing to stay in a quiet time, needing quiet time to think and be. And we realized the investment of not showing up for a rigid 9 to 5 has had a better return on investment when it comes to my wellness, my physical wellness, as well as the wellness of my children, because my children know, my husband know that I can be present, a little bit more present. Not to say that I'm able to do all things and my house is clean, my house is still a mess. But still, I'm able to do the things that I'm passionate about and it brings me joy. And there's a higher return on investment outside of what money can buy.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you made a
Mhm.
very intentional, values aligned choice and then found a way to make it work. So
Yeah,
it sounds like having the flexibility of having a few moving parts allows you to pursue passions and things that align, pursue interests, and also have a bit of a variety of income sources. And then it's easier also to turn the dial down on some where, okay, I need to be more present at home, where
mhm.
it's easier to kind of do that rather than when you're like all in on one commitment.
Exactly. And not to say that dialing in even more is not a future goal for me, but I'm pacing myself. And I'm okay with pacing myself. And as long as my family understands it, it goes back to being brave. Like, as long as the people that you value the most kind of understand it, it's okay. But even when they don't understand, I have to be okay with myself. I have to be okay with my values and my needs at that time, in that season. My season will change where I'm not going to be engrossed in multiple passions. My kids will grow older and more independent, and they may not need me to be present for supervision or need me for a lot of different things. They'll need me, but in a different way. And I'm okay with that. And I think it's important for us all OTs to assess what season they're in or which season they're in and identify the needs of that season. And like you always talk about alignment, you always speak of alignment and making sure that sometimes with alignment, it comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And are you okay with that cost
Right.
to have a better return on investment for yourself?
I think there's like, because what I'm hearing in your story is a true tuning into what your needs as a family, you being part of that family are, and matching your work to those needs as best as you can. I know it's not perfect, right? I think I see so often a lot of the OTs I talk to who have businesses, they're pretty high achievers, right? And so there's this cultural norm of constant growth and success looks like, well, I'm doing 20% better than last year in all of these metrics, or
Mhm.
50%. Like I get caught up in that too, and it's not my values, but I'll notice, like, wasn't I supposed to be more successful by now?
Exactly. No, I totally, I mean, I care about numbers too. I call myself that I'm a type B with like type A undertones.
Mm,
So I really want in my, I really want the numbers to match up to the effort that I put in or the work I put in. And yeah, I feel the same way. I'm like, by now, should I be making this much money? Or, should I be having like a bigger place or doing bigger things or whatever? But then it's almost like you're looking to the left and to the right. You're looking at what other people are doing. And it's going back to what is your purpose? What are you called here to do?
yeah.
What are you called here to do? Like
And
you to do.
yeah, yeah. There's
Mhm.
that sort of calling and another sort of just a different kind of spiritual lens as well. Why did you
Mhm.
start this? What was behind your intention to start this? And I know for me, often that's a really good reset when I go back to my vision was clear when I started.
Mhm.
I wanted to be flexible so that I could be present with my family. And I also wanted to earn more for
Mhm.
my effort than I would have essentially work part-time
Mhm.
or earning full-time salary.
Mhm.
Essentially, like, and have the flexibility to
Mhm.
change that up as my family needed, and so my kids were small when I started, and
Mhm.
now they're teenagers. One just graduated from high school, the other one's just
Oh,
starting high
nice.
school. Yeah, very exciting, but that need is still the same. I still want flexibility, and I want more bang for my buck, right? That for
Right.
the effort I'm putting in, there's
Right.
earning potential by being self-employed, and I'd like to keep that in check, not because that want all the money and all the dollars, but in a lot of ways, it's easier to have a part-time job than
Right.
a part-time
Right.
business or a full-time
Mhm.
business. And there's trade-offs.
Mhm.
There's lots of other ways it's hard too,
Mhm.
but that there's that payoff that's a bit better, that you're compensated for the risk of starting a business,
Right.
compensated for the different challenges of all of the hats and the instability and the unpredictability and all of those things. So there's that potential. But the fundamental reasons was so that I could have the flexibility to be with my family as the needs changed. And so when I'm going, oh,
Right.
but why is that not aligning? Or I'm working so hard here and that's not paying off. And I'm
Mhm.
working. So what's that definition of success by somebody else's definition?
Right.
What's the true definition of success is going back to that initial model. I don't have to
Yeah.
be earning exactly what I would have in a full-time job, but
Mhm.
that metric of are my efforts equaling a similar compensation
Mhm.
while maintaining the fundamental goal of flexibility. And by those
Right.
definitions, I'm usually doing just fine and got caught up in some other definition of success or what I thought would be here. I
Mhm.
didn't predict all of the problems we've had with inflation and getting more expensive and people being tighter
Right.
with their dollars. And that does
Mhm.
affect business. It can't help but affect business.
Yeah, and it's impacting those who travel and move and in my business too. It's impacting every component. But it's and it does play question to like why to if anyone's listening where that's inspired to be an entrepreneur or like even entrepreneurs or, that want to keep going, like why keep going when all these things are happening? Well, I think we're gonna always face problems. And we always have having to pivot. But we like you mentioned, going back to your why. My why was and currently is flexibility, just like you, and making sure that I have a clarity in my mental and my physical health. And I've has had so many physical health scares that it's vital for me to make sure that I'm pacing myself and doing the things that are meaningful, that I'm not chasing the dollar. And I also want to encourage, like, even people that are scared to jump, like, they're probably questioning, oh my gosh, well, how did you pay for this? And how are you pay for that? Like, I didn't know. I don't know. I mean, do I have a rich family? No. Was my husband rich? I don't know. But opportunities do come for those who take leaps.
Yeah.
And while I have not been active in my business for not a very long time, I had to make a decision that I'm going to fail forward because it's worth my freedom and it's worth the clarity and the mental clarity and my physical health and my family's worth it.
Yeah.
And those that love you and that support you are usually the ones that are like, yeah, go ahead and do what you're passionate about. Go and do what you have so many gifts and talents. Like you should do that. Go do that already. And stop saying what you wish you could do. Just just do it. And no, it's scary. It's scary as hell.
Totally. That's
And
why we're here.
no,
It's
exactly, exactly. It's
yeah.
scary, and we don't know where the money's gonna come from. Like you said, inflation is impacting everywhere. Do we know what our projections might be? You might, but things happen. And I've learned from having a family of 7 things are always going to happen, but it's okay to fail forward. Those losses are lessons. And you can incorporate all of the components of what you value into what you're pursuing and incorporate occupational therapy into it. What better life is that? Is to live an authentic you, pursuing the thing that you love. It could be basket weaving, but you'll be a happy basket weaver. Living authentically you. And if you mess up, just it's okay. I heard this analogy, and I only have like a little story about a baby. Like when the baby's trying to learn how to walk, like babies don't fall and then start getting mad at yourself, like, oh, I wish I, like,
I should be a better walker. Like, what the heck? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, you all are walking just fine. And
how am I going to take this next step again? Oh my gosh, I cannot understand. But they just get up and do it again, right? And they might be running into the wall. Guess what? I'm about to run into the wall or into a table or something. I'm sure there's a mom or a dad pivoting them away from those walls. And sometimes mom and dad may not be there and they might run into a wall. But that doesn't stop them from walking. It might startle them, but it might I think we should all take on the mind of a child or a baby and a kid. Pursuing things that you love are scary. There are so many scary components, but to not do it is to not be authentic to yourself. And that's how I feel.
I like that a lot. And there's elements of curiosity, there's elements of growth mindset, there's elements of just approaching everything as an opportunity to learn and expecting yourself to be a learner rather than an expert at everything. It's so freeing to show up to a situation and go, all right, what can I learn here? I'm not going to do this perfectly, so let's figure this out. And I can figure things out. And if I can't, well, there's resources, right? And what's next?
Yeah. Yeah, because what you're doing is not self-serving. Whatever you're going out to pursue, it's not self-serving. You're going to be serving someone else. Yeah. And if your bottom line is to make true impact, if your real bottom line is to make true impact in whatever you're pursuing, then you should be okay with reaching out to those resources. You should be okay with making mistakes, but saying, hey, I don't know the answer, but I can get back with you on that. Because at the end of the day, if your heart is in the right place, you're going to win anyway.
Something that I've been reflecting on, a pattern, how our brains are good at finding patterns. I feel like I've stumbled upon the meaning of life with this pattern. And the frustrating, it's so dang obvious that people are going to be like, oh yeah, Carlin, earth shattering. Thanks for the tip. But not. But grappling with big challenges, big stressors, big obstacles. What do I do with my life? What do I do with my business? What do I do with this family decision? How do I handle this situation? Almost always, if not always, the answer is to be more you. Almost always, right? If where we often struggle is in the places where it's what we're trying to do isn't aligned with who we are. We're trying to be something better or different or other, or figure out what the other person wants us to be, or where do we fit into a different mold. And then when we settle into who am I, like knowing ourselves more deeply, knowing our values more deeply, knowing our strengths and challenges, being able to show up in the most real us, that real you is open and doesn't know everything and wants to learn. Well, maybe that's not everybody, but I think coming back to our fundamental
people, we want to
right? Thinking about even as a child, right? Like we all started that way, being open and curious and wanting to learn and being humble. And that can change. But I think when we come back to our most essential self, we do just show up and be you, and things should start to align. That should solve a lot of problems. Back to your values, you're letting go of ego, letting go of expectation, and just more so tuning into what's real. It solves so many problems.
Yeah. And that's so funny. Well, I was thinking when you were saying that, I could see someone saying like, my spouse may not agree with that. My I've tried to share with my spouse that my vision and my dreams, and they batted it down. Or this is not going to work for my family. We're too pressed right now. Or, you know, we're talking about like the external chatter,
Yep.
if you will. And I would say this, like going back to seasons, there are seasons to start anything, right?
Yeah.
And if it's not your season, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can always revisit it later on because I kid you not, a year prior, probably a year or so prior to me asking my husband, hey, can I leave my full-time job? I had asked him, hey, can I leave my full-time job? And he told me no. And I was
We may
so,
have had similar conversations in our house. I can relate.
he told me no. I was like, what? And of course, that conversation didn't go exactly what the podcast listeners will hear, but I couldn't leave my job at that moment.
Yeah.
And I really felt like I had definitive things or reasons why this would be helpful to the family or vital to me. But at that time, there was no real significant change from the year to the following year. It was just simply merely, it was just the season. It was time to transition and being okay with if this is not your season to transition. That's important. I
Totally.
feel for
Totally.
those who might be listening and
Yeah.
need to understand that
'Cause I
component.
think we think that, well, yeah, I couldn't even think of earlier messaging I used too, like, go for it, leap. But there needs to be a readiness, right? And my husband and I have a lot of yin and yang, and he's more
Mhm,
like predictable, steady Freddy, like
mhm, mhm,
risk adverse, and I'm
mhm.
more dreamy and like, it's gonna work out. I can do
Right,
this. And
right,
and it's good
right.
to have that balance.
Yeah,
And
it
so,
is.
similarly, I was like, I need to get out of this job. And my husband's like, what?
What? How is 1 + 2 = 3? I don't know how that's gonna happen if you leave one's not
Totally.
even there.
Totally.
No, and
But similarly, I went back to, okay, I can appreciate that you're not feeling ready. And what do you need to feel ready? Right. And we worked on that. And there came a time where it was a better time. And there was a clearer opportunity that allowed him to feel more comfort and that this wasn't as big a risk. I knew I was
Mhm.
going to get work. But it was more tangible in that moment, and it was easier and I respect that. Like, it would
Yeah,
put a ton of pressure
yeah,
on him and create a lot of stress for him if I then didn't get the work that I thought I would, right? And so I appreciate
yeah,
that. That's respectful. I wouldn't want him to leave his job to come home and be like, "Hey, I quit. I'm out of there. I couldn't do it anymore." I'd be like,
yeah.
"But
At least like you
these
consult,
bills to
yeah, like you
pay."
didn't even consult with me. At least I asked to leave my job. Yeah. I think it's also important to also know, even if it's not your seat, let's just say it is your season, but something else is the barrier, which is character building. I
Yeah.
feel like in this time era of entrepreneurship and people stepping away from their full-time jobs, maybe to pursue passion, and you may not see things working out in your favor. But sometimes these seasons are there to stop you in your tracks to help you with character building, to prepare you for the future client you might be receiving, or to prepare you to just be ready for the nuances of entrepreneurship, to slow you down. I've interacted with so many therapists who they would love to pursue entrepreneurship and they may have the money and the resources and connections to make it a seamless process. But if your character is not prepared, maybe this is a conversation for another day, but if your character is not prepared for what you will receive, it will quickly slip from your fingers. And then if you don't have a value system connected to what you're bringing to the table or bringing to the market, that too can deter people from connecting with your business or connecting with you. And that's important too. I mean, it's not always about the dollar or the freedom. Those things are important,
Yep.
but those are not the end all be all, especially if we're out here serving people. and serving and making sure that their needs are met. They need to know, they need to have some concrete foundational things that they can relate to.
Yeah. I think too, there's sometimes maybe it's, hindsight and connecting dots, but others might say it's divine timing, right? That sometimes that door that didn't open that we thought should open right now is because there was another path for you. There was something more aligned around the corner or a different need around the corner.
Mhm.
Last year, my son was diagnosed with in August and I had been in a bit of a slump with building my online program and or just a slump. I was running my online program, it was going great, but
Right.
I wasn't having as many people enter it. And
Mhm.
I was feeling stressed about that. And I had booked a session with my psychologist after his diagnosis, just knowing it's a big adjustment. There was grief involved. There's
Mhm.
like many, many things involved and just adjusting to
Right.
it.
Right. I understand.
And I said
My
to the psychologist, I said, "Oh, and I'm stressed." She's like, "How's work?" And I said, "I'm stressed. It's, I'm working so hard on this and this and this, and it's frustrating." And I said, it's just not as much interest right now." And she's like, "Well, thank God. Like, you've got enough on your plate right now to not have overflowing work." And I was like,
right.
"Right,
Right.
right."
Right.
And looking now, it's been 1 year and it's been a full year transition. There are a lot of parts that are still hard. And I'm
Mm.
grateful that I've had the flexibility to make the time to be up a few times in the night and then not getting back to sleep right away. But thank goodness I didn't have 8 hours of back to back the next
Oh
day.
my.
Right. By the way I work, even
Right.
when I'm busy, I don't have 8 hours of back to back clients all day by design, but
Right.
also just there being times of it being a little bit slower sometimes. And it chose me rather than me choosing it.
I love that. And relating to just, like you said, the timing of everything, like so many things have happened for my family members. I had five of out of the whole gamut of the pandemic, 5 of 7 family members caught COVID. I mean, not at the same time, but still. So we are caregivers. It is a different life. And then I think about my children and one transition 2 years ago to high school, and then I had one in elementary. We moved in the past 3 years ago, and we kind of, and that's just a little bit, we've
Yeah.
had so many different things that have happened, and not bad, these are not bad things. These are just life things, right? It's important to going back so that know your season, assess your season, assess where you are. It's kind of hard to assess like your per se your character. Someone else might have to assess that too. But it's just knowing when is the right time. I mean, it may never be the right time, but when things are in flow and in good rhythm and everything is in alignment, then you'll see the abundance of the jump. But how profitable the return on investment your jump can be.
And I think that there's so much a lot of freedom in just doing it in stages too, right? That
Hmm.
there are times where it is a big jump, and then there are times where it's just kind of slowly growing into something while you slowly taper something else off. And or maybe you're just testing the waters or trying something on the side and seeing what happens. And then maybe I can reduce my FTE a little bit or whatever that is. But being able to go, or I've had some clients too where they did take the leap. They left the job that was really detrimental to their well-being, started the
Hmm.
thing, and then it didn't grow as quickly as they thought. And that sense of permission to take on PRN work, or in Canada, we call it casual work. And that's not a failure, actually. That's creating safety and security so they can continue to grow this thing, right? If I'm feeling frightened and dysregulated because my business hasn't grown as quickly as I thought, then going to be actually great at growing this business. So how can I create a sense of that I value security and stability, and that can create a sense of where I can be more curious and creative. And that's a beautiful thing that it's,
It
we often
is.
see things in black and white.
Mhm.
What do you need? What do you need? Maybe you need a little bit of this and you need a little bit of that. Maybe maintaining a 0.5 job so that you've got benefits and that enough money to cover the bases is
Mhm.
what you need, and that you're always going to want that. And
Mhm.
that maybe doing something entrepreneurial on the side is something that needs to be this big because that's that proper balance for you. Great.
Mhm.
That's not
Right.
like self-employment isn't better than being an employee. What do you need what in this stage of life. And we've talked about seasons a lot here today.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah, whatever is required for you to maintain like your purpose. If your business is not growing, okay, well, how else can you serve? How else can you serve your community? How else can you serve in a way that you feel that you're being valued for what you're providing? I really hope that more and more out. Wow, it's so cool that so many OTs are seeking entrepreneurship and serving and connecting with their niches and really building some significant brands. It's so important to always have a moment to reflect on the value system, reflect on the why. Why are you even called to do this? And it may steer you back to your business. It may steer you into something else, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to be steered into a different direction. I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to be able to, and I know you are definitely, to explore those options and explore, even it might be to the point of sacrifice in other areas, to be able to explore the options of how best you can serve. Like, it's a phenomenal opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thankful.
Me too. So thankful.
Mhm.
There's something too around that sense of gratitude is about being thankful for what is, which is very
Mhm.
different than an aspirational goal, but rather what
Mhm.
is here. Can I be grateful for that? And that creates so much more room for joy and satisfaction and fulfillment. Um,
Right.
whether it meets what you thought it would be by now or not, doesn't
Mhm.
really impact your joy. Like the joy is about that gratitude for what is.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I agree. How people look at happiness, I guess the traditional look of happiness is what you have, what are you have achieved, etc. But those things are fleeting. Those things are not concrete. And when you establish like your business or you establish your career on something of your values, and what if everybody canceled on you and every patient didn't show, what would you still be in gratitude for? I'm in gratitude of having a skill set that I can serve people. I'm in gratitude that I was able to make it to work today. I could have been hospitalized. I could have been in a car accident. And those are just like surface level gratitudes. And I don't want to belittle gratitude because gratitudes are very much like one thing can take away, change your whole life. But you are so right. Like those gratitudes lead to joy, just pure joy.
Well, I am grateful that we are having this conversation. May I ask you four more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
What does being brave mean to you?
Being brave is being able to tell yourself, I am okay with not being okay, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, that is very brave. And what's something brave you've done recently?
So, right now, I am hosting a therapy student empowerment week
Mm.
where we've invited several guests for each day of this week to pour into our therapy students. And I've never had an empowerment week a day in my life. I just knew that after looking at fellow therapy students and their needs and just assessing the things that they experiencing and going through, there had to be a space where therapy students could be poured into and had a safe space to ask questions. And I really sought out individuals, and there are more people, trust me, but there's really sought out individual speakers that could really speak to their specific needs. And I was super, super nervous because I didn't know if I was going to get a yes or a no from a speaker, or I didn't know how I was going to pull it off because I too have a business and, kids and
Yeah.
life, right? but things are working itself out. And I am thankful that I went ahead and pursued it. I was discouraged actually by someone to not necessarily pursue it in its entirety. And I did it anyway because I just knew my why. I had a strong why. And if no one showed, I was like, you know what? As long as it's recorded, I will share it sporadically and someone will hear this and the timing will be perfect. So yeah, that was my brave thing I've done. And I'm happy that I started it.
That's good. That's great. Yes. And I think it is easier to be brave when it is aligned with your values, your purpose, your intention. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, there's really no way to go wrong if there is that alignment. You're resilient, you're creative, you'll find other ways to use things. And so
Right.
it'll never be a loss, even
Right.
if it's just a good conversation with a few people. It's never,
Most definitely.
yeah,
Never alone. Yeah.
good. What would you like to see OTs get a little bit more brave about in the coming years?
That's a good question. I'm gonna say two things. Clinical judgment when it comes to new grads. Just be brave. Just go out there. Just do it. Do it. Just
Like
go treat
rather
the
rather than
person.
trying to find that perfect answer sort of thing, not
Yeah.
trusting their judgment.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So yeah, so just not trusting their judgment or just, nervous. Sometimes it's just nerve, like, oh my gosh, I'm about to treat my first patient. And that nervous energy is great. It's fine. I'm not saying that it's like, oh, don't be nervous. You'll be fine. I still
Doesn't
get
work that
nervous.
way. Yeah.
Right. I still get nervous, right?
Yeah.
So in treating, especially when I'm treating a new patient, I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope everything works itself out. But I really want them to trust their intuition and trust their gut that everything will be okay. As long as safety is a priority, everything will work itself out.
Yeah. You don't want them to be
Um,
irresponsible.
oh, most definitely. We don't want that. No. No. As for clinicians, probably that are not novice clinicians, I was going to be brave at just pursuing the thing or the thing that they've been called to be to the world. Um, I think we all innately know what we would. I really feel that we have some idea. We may not know it in its full entire scope and how it looks, but I think we all have an idea of what we are good at and what we have been called to bring to the world we live in.
Mm,
I would hope that each MT become brave in pursuing what they've already been called to become. And if they're operating in that, then keep doing that brave thing.
yeah. Very good. Yeah, because some days we feel a little less oomph, even if we are working in our calling. Sometimes we can feel a bit beaten down, or is this the
Yes,
right thing?
man.
Or have I
Yeah.
changed? Or has the world changed? Or is something else needed? And come
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And those things might have changed. And it's okay to pivot, but that doesn't really ever really change the core of the calling.
It's true. It's very true. Now, if people would like to connect with you for any reason, where do you hang out? How should they find you?
Tend to post pretty much all of my handles, if you will, on Instagram under ebony_OT.
Right?
Ebony means black,
Perfect.
and I'm a black OT.
You sure are?
So, yeah. So it's ebony_OT. And if anyone is interested in my Black Ally Health group, it's BAH Therapist on Instagram. And then also, if anyone's interested in the TLC for OTs group, where we just talk about tender love and care for our therapists,
Yeah.
therapy OTs, it's TLC for OTs on Facebook.
Okay. Well, I will put those in the show notes so that people can access them. Thank you
Mhm.
so much, Ashley. I'm really grateful to have you in my online OT world and so nice to have this extended conversation. I enjoy every time we talk.
Yes, indeed. I thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been really fun. And we talked about a gamut of things. And I'm just so thankful that you are in this space, that you are showing up in this space, and that this podcast even exists. So thank you so
Mm.
much.
My pleasure. I don't know what the heck we're going to call this.
I don't know.
I've learned that's sort of my style, is to go with the flow on this podcast. And so usually when I re-listen, I can find a string to pull out. But I love how these conversations wander, and I hope that the listener does as well. If I had a mission and an objective and kept us on task, we wouldn't have gotten into some of the beautiful corners we did. And I like that way of allowing it to unfold.
Yeah, if it's meant to be for the person who's listening, they'll hear the right part at the right time.
Yep.
And I hopeful that it will empower them to be braver.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed listening to that discussion as much as Ashley and I enjoyed having it. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do share it with your friends, post it on social media. Be sure to tag me. I'm most active on Facebook, Carlin OT Coach, but you can also find me on Instagram, Balanceworks OT. Thanks for listening, and as always, be brave, OTs.